Hi, welcome to Virtual CB1A. This is Miss Rena, and today we are going to have a discussion about increasing and decreasing functions. Sulat nga natin dito yung title. So we have increasing. Hi, welcome to Virtual CB1A. This is Miss Rena, and for today's lesson, we are going to talk about increasing and decreasing functions. Okay. So recall that we have a lot of different types of functions. We have linear, quadratic, cubic, polynomial of higher degrees, and rational functions. Also, from your advanced algebra, we tackled exponential functions and logarithmic functions. So let's start with the definition of increasing. So if from an interval A and B, the value of the function f of x increases as the value x in the interval AB increases. Okay? Now, for decreasing functions, so if from an interval AB, the values of the function f of x decreases as the value x in the interval AB increases. So let's look at these examples. For example, you have there a line such as this one. So what do you observe about the behavior of the function from the interval AB? So for every values of x here in this interval AB, so given that A is less than B. So from A to B, the value of the function f of x increases as the value for the input x. Ba't hindi ko siya masulatan? As the value for the input x increases from left to right as well. Okay, so this is f of x sub 1, this is f of x sub 2, this is f of x sub 3. Now, let's look at another graph. Say, for example, you are presented with a line that looks like this. So, what do you observe on our linear function? So, on this specific example, inside the interval AB, again, A is less than B, we have there infinitely many points inside. And for all these points, we can find the value of the function f of x. So this is f of x sub 1. This is f of x sub 2. This is f of x sub 3. Now notice the value for our function f of x, what will happen when you input our values x sub 1, x sub 2, and x sub 3? So in this Cartesian plane, the value of our function decreases as our value in the set of input x increases. So baligtad siya. Habang tumataas yung value natin ng input x in the interval a and b, bumababa naman yung value ng function f of x natin. So this is an example of a decreasing function. Now, since we are not limited with linear functions, we are also going to talk about quadratic functions and cubic functions, polynomial functions of higher degrees, and possibly we will also touch rational functions, exponential and logarithmic. Lagay na natin dito yung mga prerequisites for, lagay na natin yung mga prerequisites for solving, increasing, or finding out the behavior of functions, determining whether they are increasing or decreasing. So when we are given with linear functions, ano yung mga dapat alam nyo for you to find out whether your given functions are increasing or decreasing? So it'll be easier to determine whether they are increasing or decreasing if you have knowledge about slopes. So, and also it will be helpful if you will recall the slope-intercept form of linear equations. Since masyadong mahaba yung magiging lesson natin for increasing and decreasing functions, I will subdivide the video into multiple lectures, okay? So for linear functions, if you have an equation in the slope-intercept form, y is equal to mx plus b, our slope m will help us determine whether a function is increasing or decreasing. How? So slopes are important in finding the behavior of the function within a given interval. For linear functions, to determine whether it decreases or increases, just look for the slope. For linear equations with positive slopes, ito, automatically the behavior of your function will be increasing. If you have negative slopes, automatically the behavior of your function at a given interval will be decreasing. Now, if you have this kind of linear equation, this has a zero slope. So, automatically, this is neither of the two. It is neither increasing nor decreasing. And, although hindi naman natin to talaga kailangan, this is just a vertical line. We know that if we have vertical lines, undefined yung slope niya at hindi siya function. So, we are only going to focus on these three types of functions here. Lagay tayo ng isa pa ulit na sheet. Yan, dumadami siya, di ba? So, let's have here an example. Lagay tayo ng piecewise na function. Pero yung piecewise na function na ibibigay ko, lahat sila linear equation yung laman sa loob. So, if we have a piecewise function where all pieces can be represented by lines, we have f of x is equal to x plus 1 if x is less than 0. Next, we have 1 if x is greater than 0 but less than 5. And finally, we have here negative x plus 6 if x is greater than 5. So, paano natin malalaman if they are increasing or decreasing? So, there are two methods. One is by relying in the slope, and the other one is, of course, examining it visually. Unahin natin yung visual na examination. So, visually, you can look at the graph of the function. And then, examine the graph to see if they increases or decreases within a given interval. So, I suggest that you install Desmos application. It is downloadable in Play Store. Kasi ito yung, sa tingin ko, pinakamadaling gamitin na graphing application. And then, just input these three equations individually dun sa kanya-kanya nilang tab. Color-coded din naman yung mga graphs sa Desmos. So, you can easily see which graph corresponds to which equation. Since wala tayong Desmos at nag-aaral tayo ulit ng increasing and decreasing function, we are going to graph this manually. Let me just draw here a Cartesian plane. So this is 1. 1. So let's look at the first equation. It is x plus 1. So x plus 1 can be represented by the function y is equal to x plus 1, wherein our y-intercept is b. It means that your graph should pass through 1 here. Okay? And for every increased 1, since the slope is also 1, you are going to move 1 unit to the right. Ayan. And of course, kapag ka nag-decrease ka ng isang unit din yung ipupunta niya sa kaliwa. All you need is at least 2 points to be able to draw the graph of your function. Ayan yung graph natin for x plus 1. From here, sabi ko nga, titingnan natin kung ano yung behavior niya within a given interval from negative infinity to 0. Increasing ba siya o decreasing? Okay, we are going to answer it later. First, let's graph the second function. So, this is 1. Ibig sabihin, for any value that you input in x, always the output will be 1. And that is only for every x greater than 0 but less than 5. So, ang interval lang natin hanggang 5. So, titigil tayo at this point. Yan. 1 siya hanggang makarating sa 5. And finally, we have negative x plus 6. Ito. So, y-intercept naman niya ay 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, yan. Dadaan siya dito. And then, for the slope, it is negative 1. So, for every 1 unit decrease, you will move to the right 1 unit. So, for every 1 unit decrease, you will move to the right 1 unit. Ayan. So, kapag ka-graph mo yan, ganyan yung itsura niya. Yan. Okay, it will pass through at this point. So, the 0 is at positive 6. Alright. Now, this is the representation of our piecewise function. But take note, defined lang siya at certain intervals. So, may mga parts tayo dito sa graph na to na kailangan nating burahin. Bakit? So, pangalanan natin kung ano-ano yung mga intervals natin. So, for here, the first interval is negative infinity to 0. Kasi every value x less than 0. So, any value to the left of 0, but not including 0. And next, we have 0. So, mula 0, papunta sa 5. Pero, excluded si 0 at 5. Any value close to 0 or between 0 and 5, but not including 0 and 5. And finally, we have 5. Papunta sa kanan. So, punta tayo sa positive infinity. So, any value of x greater than 5. So, these are the 3 intervals that we are going to find the behavior of our function. Ayan. Determine pala, find daw eh. Sabi ko kanina, magbubura tayo. Yan, burahin natin. From negative infinity to 0. So, hanggang dito lang siya. So, itong blue na to, hindi pala siya pwedeng maging ganyan ka laki. Dapat, ganito lang siya. Yan. Tapos, yung kasunod, from 0 to 5. So, si green, dapat 0 to 5 lang siya. Okay naman. Hindi naman tayo nag-extend. But for the third function, dapat from 5 to positive infinity lang siya. So, ito, hindi to kasali. Yan. So, our piecewise function is represented by this graph. And you have to take note that you have to use open intervals. So, dapat ito ay unshaded. Kasi excluded yung mga values natin at those points. Yan. Hindi sila kasali. Yan. So, this is the function that will, this is the graph of the function that will represent our piecewise function. Now, let us determine the behavior for each interval. Let's make a table here to summarize the behavior of our function at given intervals. Unahin natin yung unang interval kanina. So, the interval is from negative infinity to 0. What do you notice from negative infinity to 0? The slope is, of course, positive. Diba? So, ang slope niya ay positive. So, what will be the behavior of your function from the interval negative infinity to 0? So, the behavior will be increasing. So, your function will increase in the interval negative infinity to 0. Next, dun tayo sa pangalawang interval, 0 to 5. What is the slope of your line from 0 to 5? So, if you will take notice there, it is represented by a horizontal line. That means that your slope is 0. So, ito ay neither increasing nor decreasing. Next ulit tayo. Last na interval na, yes. We have 5 to positive infinity. If you have the interval 5 to positive infinity, this is the line corresponding to the yellow line. Ayan. What do you notice about the slope? Papababa siya, ganyan. So, it is negative. Therefore, this is decreasing at the interval 5 to positive infinity. So, that is how you check for the behavior of your function visually. So, graphically, ganyan tayo mag-examine. All you have to do is to take note of the different kinds of slope that we have for linear functions. Alright, let's go to the next part. So, dun sa next part natin, dinuplicate ko lang siya kasi buburahin ko lang yung ibang part. So, kung kanina, visually tayo, ngayon naman, magfo-focus tayo dun sa idea ng slopes at saka ng linear equations. So, titingnan lang natin yung mga equation ng line dito. Hindi tayo mag-graph. Pero again, syempre, burahin ko na lang yung ibang parts dito. Yan. Pangit. Burahin ko na lahat. Okay. Yan. So, sabi ko nga, hindi tayo mag-graph this time. Is it possible to still find the behavior of your function within given intervals if you are not represented by graph? So, let's recall the idea of slope-intercept form of a linear equation. That is given by the formula y is equal to mx plus b. Notice that our functions are in the form y is equal to mx plus b. Tama? So, una natin, we have x plus 1. Unang function natin, yung kulay blue, f of x is equal to x plus 1. You can write it as y is equal to mx plus b. And that will give you y is equal to x plus 1. So, madedetermine natin kung ano yung slope. Kasi yung m dito, siya yung slope. Diba? So, our slope for this line is equal to whatever it is beside our variable x. So, ano yung nakalagay dito sa tabi ng x natin dito? If you don't see any value beside the variable x, that means that the numerical coefficient is equal to 1. And what do we know about the value 1? It is positive, of course. Now, let's go to the next function. We have f of x is equal to 1. So, sulat natin siya in the form y is equal to mx plus b. We have y is equal to 1. So, ano yung slope niyan? Baka sabihin, wala daw slope. May slope yan. So, pwede natin siya isulat as y is equal to mx plus b. Only that, to get rid of the variable x, kasi wala siyang variable x dito, di ba? The numerical coefficient of x must be 0. So, we know that the product of 0 and any value, any number is also 0. And then, let's add here 1. So, what is the slope of our function here? M is equal to 0. 0 siya. Ngayon, dito tayo sa dulo. We have f of x is equal to negative x plus 6. Let's write it in slope-intercept form. Y is equal to negative x plus 6. Yan. What is your slope? Your slope here is negative 1. Kasi may negative symbol lang tayo beside the variable x. That means the numerical coefficient of x is negative 1. And we know that negative 1 is negative. Again, gawa tayo ng table, summary table for our intervals here. So, interval ulit natin dito. Lagay natin siya. Interval. We have negative infinity to 0, followed by 0 to 5. Next, we have 5 to positive infinity. What is your slope? M. Your slope M here is 1. That is positive. Your slope here is 0, that is, of course, 0. Your slope here is negative 1, that is, of course, negative. Sorry, sinimbol ko na lang yung kanina dito. And then, dun tayo sa behavior. Ano yung behavior nung line natin from negative infinity to 0? Of course, it is increasing. Followed by, of course, this is neither increasing nor decreasing. Neither na lang yung susulat ko. Kaya na lang magtuksong. And finally, we have here decreasing functions. Okay? Now, let us look at another example. So, linear function pa rin. Sige. Damihan natin yung example para hindi tayo nalilito. Lagay tayo ng bagong sheet dito sa dulo. Okay. If you have f of x is equal to negative 3x minus 4, you can check for the graph using Desmos app and look at the function, examine what kind of slope does this function have. Pero, magpo-focus lang tayo dun sa mismong equation. Anong behavior niya? Increasing ba siya? Decreasing? What? Alright. So, let's look at the slope m. M is negative 3. So, since negative ang slope niya, this is decreasing at anong interval? May predefined na interval ba dito? Wala. But we know that if you have linear functions, we don't have any restrictions. It will extend indefinitely in the Cartesian coordinate plane. So, lahat ng mga values niya sa set of real numbers madadaanan for the domain and range. So, this is decreasing at negative infinity to the positive infinity. Okay? Now, let's go to the next function. Meron tayong piecewise ulit. Gawin natin siyang x minus 2 at saka negative 2x plus 3. So, this is if x is less than 0 and the other one is if x is greater than 0. So, mahahati yung ating number line into two different intervals. So, meron kang from negative infinity. Ano ba yan? Ayaw. Negative infinity to 0 at saka 0 to positive infinity. Eh, baka may magtanong, paano kung 0? O, paano nga naman pag 0? So, ano yung magiging value niya at 0? Kung hindi siya matatouch, wala. Hindi siya defined. So, wala naman tayo ditong greater than, less than eh. So, hindi siya kasali sa mga intervals natin. So, for this part, let's analyze the slope for the first interval. So, for the first interval, negative infinity to 0, the slope is equal to 1, and it is positive. Therefore, it is increasing. At the interval, negative infinity to 0. What about 0 to positive infinity? Ang m niya is negative 2. So, that is decreasing at those intervals. Okay? Now, let's move to another example. Halimbawa, meron kang f of x is equal to 5. What will be the behavior of this function? Will this increase? Decrease? What? Okay, the m slope is 0. So, this is neither decreasing nor increasing. So, wala. Wala siyang pagtaas, wala siyang pagbaba. Alright. I hope I was able to make it clear for finding the behavior of linear functions within given intervals. Cut ko muna yung video at this point. Tapos, balik tayo for higher degree functions, okay?